My mom died believing she was loved, and I found out my dad already had someone else when I saw the dates on the photos. The funny thing about grief is how it makes you ignore the obvious. For a long time after my mom died, I convinced myself that my dad was this broken, fragile man who needed to be handled like glass. I was so busy trying to take care of him that I did not really look at what he was actually doing. I just kept repeating this script in my head about how much he had lost, how hard it must be for him to go back to an empty house, how nobody understands grief the same way. It was easier to stick with that version than admit that something felt off every time he said he was fine while also sighing dramatically about how exhausted he was. By the time the third spring rolled around after she passed, I was the one who felt exhausted. I was juggling my job at a medical office, rent for my tiny apartment, student loans, and constant low-level worry about my dad. Every time we talked, he brought up how stressed he was, how he never really relaxed anymore, how everything reminded him of my mom and he could not escape the weight of it. He kept saying he needed a break, but then always had an excuse for why he would never actually go anywhere. Money, work, responsibilities, you name it. So one night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a stack of bills pushed to the side, and decided I was going to give him that break whether he liked it or not. I spent hours comparing resorts by the ocean, reading reviews about pools and buffets and how quiet the rooms were at night. I booked a trip for the three of us for late spring, before the summer crowds but after the worst of the cold. 2 suites, ocean view, all meals included, some activities already paid. I made sure to book the flexible rate even though it cost a bit more, because I wanted the option to cancel or change if something went wrong. I put it all on my credit card, swallowed the panic at the total, and told myself that my tax refund would cover part of it and I could figure out the rest later. My plan was simple. I would surprise my dad with the trip once everything was confirmed, tell him I had used some savings and a little bit of help from my brother, and absolutely not mention that I was the one paying for almost everything. I did not want him to feel guilty or try to cancel because of money. I wanted him to have a week where he did not have to think about hospital rooms or my mom's empty side of the bed. I wanted to see him laugh without that weird tightness around his eyes. A week after I got the confirmation email, I was sitting at work on my lunch break, half scrolling through a social media app and half staring at my leftover pasta, when a new email popped up with the name of the resort in the subject line. I opened it thinking it was just another generic welcome message, or maybe a reminder about check-in times. Instead, it said, very cheerfully, that my modification had been processed and an additional suite had been added to my booking. I read that line 3 times before it really registered. An extra suite. Added to my booking. I had originally reserved 2. One for me, one for my dad and my brother to share, because my brother basically lives out of a backpack and does not care where he sleeps as long as it is free. I definitely had not added anything. The email said the change had been made through the online management link, and that for privacy reasons they could not share who accessed it. At first I thought it was some kind of glitch. Maybe their system duplicated something. Maybe they had confused my reservation with another one. I called them during my break. The woman on the phone was polite and firm. The extra suite was linked to my reservation. The confirmation came through the original link I had received. And yes, there would be an additional cost per night. No, she could not tell me who made the change. No, there was no mistake in the system. When I hung up, there was this cold feeling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the refrigerated air in the office break room. I replayed the last week in my head and realized there was exactly one person who had access to that management link besides me. My dad. I had forwarded him the email with all the, "Look at this place. You are going to love it" excitement because he kept asking for details. He wanted to see the pool, the restaurant, the spa menu, the room photos. I thought it was cute that he was so curious. Now it did not feel cute at all. I called my brother first because he is usually the chaos element in the family, and I wanted to rule him out. He picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding like he had just rolled out of bed even though it was almost noon. "Hey, did you add a room to the trip?" I asked, skipping any kind of small talk. "What trip?" he mumbled, then went, "Oh, the beach thing, right?" "No, why would I add a room? I do not even know how to do that." "You did not give the link to anyone? You did not invite some girl without telling me?" I pushed, because honestly that sounded like the kind of impulsive thing he might do. "If I had a girlfriend right now, you would know," he said. "I swear, I did not touch anything." "What is going on?" "There is a 3rd suite on our reservation," I said. "Someone added it." He whistled softly. "Well, if it was not you and it was not me, I think we both know who loves clicking random links without reading anything." I already knew that, obviously, but hearing him say it made my chest feel tight. I told him I would call him later, then dialed my dad with my heart hammering. He picked up sounding out of breath, like I had interrupted him halfway up a flight of stairs. I asked how he was, tried to sound casual, then slipped the question about the third room into the conversation like it was not the whole reason I had called. He went quiet for a second, then his voice got sharp. "Why are you checking my business? I thought this was supposed to be a relaxing trip, not some interrogation." "It is my credit card," I reminded him, trying to keep my tone level. "The resort emailed me. They said someone used the link to add an extra suite. I just want to know what is going on." He sighed dramatically. "You worry too much. It is fine. I did add a room. I invited someone who needs a break. It is not a big deal. I assumed you and your brother were splitting costs anyway." I almost laughed because the idea of my brother splitting anything other than a pizza was ridiculous. "Who did you invite?" I asked instead. "Just a friend," he said. "She has been going through a lot. I thought it would be good for everyone. You kids are adults now. You do not need to monitor everything I do." He said friend, like it was the most normal thing in the world to invite some mystery woman on a trip that I had planned and paid for. He also somehow slid in the detail that he imagined we were splitting the costs, which told me he had not really thought about the money beyond assuming someone else would handle it. He still kept talking about how tight things were, about interest rates and overdue bills. And at no point did he offer to pay for the extra room he had casually added to my tab. I hung up from that call with a weird buzzing in my ears. There was something about his tone that did not match the broken, fragile man I had been protecting in my head. Defensive, sure. Secretive, definitely. Fragile, not so much. That night, after staring at those social media photos until my eyes burned, I did something probably stupid. I called my dad's cell phone. It was late enough that I figured he might be asleep and I could leave a casual voicemail, just to see if anything sounded off when he called back. Instead, he answered on the first ring, sounding wide awake. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. And I could hear a woman's voice in the background saying something I could not make out. "I just wanted to check in about the trip," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Make sure you got all the details." "Oh, she is so excited," he said without thinking, then caught himself. "I mean, yeah, I got everything. Listen, can I call you back tomorrow? I am in the middle of something." Before I could answer, I heard the woman's voice again, clearer this time, laughing and saying, "Is that her? Let me say hi." There was a rustling sound, like the phone changing hands, and then her voice came through, sugary and bright. "Hi, is this his daughter? I am so happy to finally talk to you. He told me you are organizing the trip. I cannot wait to meet you in person. I have never stayed anywhere that fancy before. I am already planning all the pictures I am going to post." For a couple of seconds, I could not get any words out. She sounded excited, rehearsed, like she had been waiting for this moment. She talked like she was his partner, like that was just a settled fact. She used words like we and our plans, and talked about family, like she had been around for years. In the background, I could hear my dad trying to get the phone back, telling her to give it here. But she kept talking, saying something about how she had already picked out which swimsuit to wear the first day. I hung up without saying goodbye, then just sat there with my phone in my hand, staring at the wall of my living room. After I hung up from that call, I sat at my kitchen table replaying every word. The way she talked did not match the timeline my dad had been selling. He made it sound new, but she sounded like someone who had been around for a while. Later that night, after my shift, I heated up frozen leftovers for dinner and opened my laptop to my dad's profile on a social media app. I usually avoided it because the old pictures of him and my mom at barbecues and birthdays hurt to look at. This time, I had a specific question. I scrolled past the old photos and went straight to the recent stuff, looking for any trace of her. It did not take long. 2 weeks earlier, there was a photo of my dad at a restaurant, sitting across from a woman I did not recognize who was leaning in close, her hand on his arm. The caption was something vague about getting back out there. And the comments from people I did not know were full of things like, "You two look great together," and "Finally, you deserve to be happy." I kept scrolling and found another picture from almost a year ago. Same woman. Different restaurant. My mom was still alive at that point, in and out of the hospital, hooked up to machines while my dad said he needed to run back to work for a bit. I used to watch him leave the hospital room with his laptop bag, tell my mom I would sit with her until he came back, and think he was this devoted husband balancing everything. Now, I was staring at a time-stamped picture of him with another woman, while my mom's skin was turning gray under fluorescent lights. I felt sick. There is no better word for it. I clicked on the woman's profile and saw more photos, including one where my dad's hand was on the small of her back at some work event, both of them laughing. I remembered how he used to always say he kept his work life and home life separate, how he liked his privacy, how there was no need to drag the kids into office politics. It all looked a lot less noble from where I was sitting. I could have closed the laptop and pretended I had not seen any of it. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I called my mom's sister. My aunt answered with her usual practical tone, like she was already halfway through a to-do list. I told her about the trip, about the extra room, about the woman who answered my dad's phone like she had been rehearsing for a meet-the-family moment. Then I said the woman's first name and waited. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, long enough that I pulled the phone away from my ear to check if the call had dropped. Then my aunt let out this low breath that sounded like she had been holding it for years. "I was afraid of that," she said finally. I asked what she meant, and she told me that the woman used to work with my dad. People at his job had been making comments for a while about how much time they spent together. There were rumors, little things, nothing she felt she could bring to my mom without proof. She said she had seen them together once at a work holiday party. Standing too close? The kind of close that does not make sense if you are just friendly coworkers. She told me she had tried to convince herself it was nothing because my mom was already so sick and she did not want to add more pain. Listening to her, I felt this hot rush of anger and guilt crawl up my neck. I thought about the nights my mom was too weak to sit up in bed, how she would squeeze my hand and say she hated that my dad had to sleep alone at home while she was stuck in a hospital. I thought about how he would show up in the mornings with coffee and tired eyes, talking about late nights at the office. I had believed every word because I wanted to. My aunt kept talking, her voice tight. She said she had never liked how my dad's grief looked from the outside, the way he would perform certain things loudly, especially when other people were around, and then shut down completely when it was just family. "I did not say anything," she said, "because I did not have proof and I did not want your mother to die thinking her whole marriage was a lie." I sat on my couch with my knees pulled up to my chest, feeling like the floor had shifted under me. The trip that had started as this big loving gesture now felt like a stage my dad was trying to use to impress the woman he had probably been seeing while my mom was still fighting for her life. Later that night, I called my brother again. I told him everything. The social media photos, the aunt's story, the voicemail sugar voice calling herself our dad's partner. He went very quiet for a while, which is rare for him. "I met her once," he finally said. "I thought she was just someone from work. They showed up to one of my games together a long time ago. I did not think it was a thing." We stayed on the phone for almost 2 hours, going back and forth between disbelief and anger and those awful little memories that suddenly made more sense now. The nights when my dad would drop by the hospital for only a few minutes and then rush off. The way he had always insisted on handling all my mom's medications himself. The way he had cried loudest at the funeral, like he was auditioning for the role of most devastated. By the end of the call, the anger had solidified into something more focused. My brother said, "We cannot let him just walk into that resort with her like this is some romantic movie. There have to be consequences." He was the one who said the word revenge first. I pretended not to like it, but the truth is, it landed in a place inside me that had been quietly building since I saw that first photo. We started planning. The idea came together faster than I expected. We would wait. We would not confront him before the trip. We would smile and nod and let him think everything was fine. And then, once the timing was just right, we would pull the rug out from under his little fantasy. My brother suggested canceling the reservation at the last minute so he and his girlfriend would show up and have nowhere to stay. I hesitated, because there is still this part of me that is 12 years old and wants my dad's approval. But then I pictured my mom's swollen hands, the way she apologized for being a burden while he was off having dinner with someone else. That hesitation melted pretty quickly. "We are not talking about one bad decision," my brother said. "He had months, years. He made choices over and over. If he gets embarrassed once, that is not even close to what he deserves." I knew he was right. It still felt terrifying, like I was planning a crime instead of just canceling a hotel booking. But it also felt like the first time in a long time that I was not just accepting whatever my dad decided to do. Over the next few days, my dad called more often than usual. He wanted to know what time our flights were, if he needed to bring anything special, if I knew what kind of food the resort served. He sounded lighter than I had heard him in years. Every time he mentioned how excited she was about the trip, I had to bite my tongue. He never said her name, by the way. Not once. She was always my friend, or someone who has had a hard time, or a person who needs a vacation. It was like he thought if he kept it vague enough, I could not be mad. Over the next couple of weeks after discovering the truth, I had to act like nothing had changed. Every call with my dad felt like walking on glass, while he talked about restaurants he wanted to try and how relaxed he would be. I gave short answers, let him think everything was fine, and kept one eye on the calendar. I needed to be close enough to the trip that he could not easily fix anything, but still inside the cancellation window I had on the flexible rate. 3 days before our departure, after another long call where my dad went on about how she was packing her best outfits, I made my move. Late that night, when I knew he would not be checking email, I logged into the resort website, pulled up my reservation, and hit the cancel button. The system confirmed the cancellation and the refund. The money would not show up right away, but the hold on my card was gone, so I booked a simpler hotel for me and my brother. My dad never really read emails. He just called and made other people explain things to him. I kept the flights exactly as they were. I was not trying to strand him at the airport. I just was not going to pay for his romantic reveal. When my brother texted the next morning asking if I was ready for the trip, I told him what I had done. "When do we tell him?" he asked. "We do not," I typed back. "We let him find out at check-in." He sent back a bunch of messages that were basically different versions of damn and okay, I am in. And that was that. For the next 2 days, I had to keep acting normal. My dad kept calling, kept sending little links about things he wanted to try on the trip, kept hinting about how nice it would be for all of us to finally have some happy memories together again. He did not know that my version of happy memories no longer included him. My aunt checked in on me a few times too. When I told her about the plan, she did not even pretend to be shocked. She just said, "About time someone held him accountable," and asked if we had all the confirmation emails saved. The day of the trip came faster than I expected. I packed my suitcase with more care than I needed to, folded my swimsuits and sundresses like I was assembling armor. My brother picked me up in his beat-up car that morning, and we drove to the airport together in tense silence. When we pulled up to departures, he turned to me with a smirk that was half excitement, half nerves. "You ready for this?" he asked. I nodded, even though my stomach was in knots. My dad and his friend were already inside when we got to the gate. I spotted them from a distance before he saw us. She was shorter than I expected, with perfect hair and a tight dress that did not look comfortable for flying. She clung to his arm, laughing too loudly at something he said. When he finally turned and saw us, his face lit up in a way that made my chest hurt for a second. I had to remind myself that most of the time when he smiled like that during my childhood, it was because my mom was standing next to him. "Look who made it," he said, pulling me into a hug. I could smell his cologne, the same one he always wore to the hospital, and for a second the memories almost drowned me. Then she wrapped her arms around me like we had known each other for years. "I am so happy to finally meet you," she said. "He talks about you all the time. This trip is going to be amazing." Her voice was even more sugary in person. She called herself my dad's partner right away, like there was no awkwardness, no history, no wife who had died 3 years earlier after a long, ugly illness. She told me she had never stayed anywhere this luxurious before, and that she already had outfits planned for each day. She said she could not wait to post photos. Who says that to their boyfriend's daughter on the first meeting? Apparently, she does. My brother shook her hand stiffly and then moved to stand by the windows, staring out at the planes like they were suddenly the most interesting thing in the world. I went to the bathroom under the excuse of fixing my hair and ended up just standing in front of the mirror, gripping the sink, breathing in and out, until my heartbeat slowed down again. I thought about backing out, about confessing everything, and canceling the whole revenge idea. But then I remembered that picture of my mom in a hospital gown with a plastic bracelet on her wrist while my dad texted someone and said he had to step out. I remembered the restaurant photos. I remembered my aunt's voice. When I came back, boarding had started. We all got on the plane. My dad and I were seated together, my brother across the aisle. His girlfriend sat several rows back, because he had bought her ticket later and the seats were almost gone by then. For the entire flight, my dad acted like someone who had pulled off something impressive. He kept talking about the resort, about how she was going to love the ocean view, about how proud my mom would be that he was finally trying to live again. I did not trust myself to say much, so I mostly listened and nodded, adding an occasional uh-huh when necessary. My brother and I exchanged looks over my dad's head. We did not need words. When we landed, the chaos of the airport gave me something to focus on that was not my own anger. We picked up our bags, went through the usual mess of finding the right shuttle area. My dad was glued to his girlfriend, helping with her luggage, kissing her temple. She kept talking about how everything looked fancy and like a movie. I wanted to tell her that the only movie she had signed up for was a low-budget one with terrible reviews. At the exit, my brother and I veered off casually toward the rideshare line. My dad assumed we were all going together to the resort and started to follow, but I said quickly, "We actually booked a car through our hotel," which was technically true because the new place had a shuttle. He blinked. Our hotel? Our hotel, I repeated. Me and my brother. I will explain later. You guys go ahead and check in so you are not standing in line forever. He frowned, but let it go, probably because his girlfriend was tugging his arm, eager to get to the place she had been daydreaming about on social media. We watched them walk away pulling their suitcases, then climbed into the shuttle that had our actual name on the little sign. My brother burst into nervous laughter as soon as the doors closed. Do you think they are going to call before or after they start yelling at the front desk? He asked. I am guessing right after, I said, even though my heart was pounding. Sure enough, less than an hour later, while we were checking into our simple but clean room at the other hotel, my phone started buzzing. My dad's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. His voice came through tight and furious. Where are you? He demanded. What is going on? They are saying there is no reservation here for us. They have nothing under your name. We checked into our hotel already, I said calmly. Different place. Our hotel? He repeated, that edge back in his voice. You said we were all staying at the resort. They have no record of us. Do you know how embarrassing this is? I am standing here with my friend, and they are looking at me like I am trying to scam them. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I canceled the reservation, I said. There was a beat of silence. You what? I canceled it, I repeated. I booked it in the first place, remember? The charges were on my card, so I canceled and I booked somewhere else for me and my brother. He started swearing then, which I am not going to repeat word by word, but the general theme was that I had lost my mind. He said I had humiliated him, that I had ruined everything, that he had told people about this trip. Why would you do that? He finally asked, his voice cracking on the last word. I almost felt sorry for him in that moment. If I had not known what I knew, I might have. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked, when exactly did you start seeing her? He sputtered. What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it, I said. Because I know you worked with her while Mom was still alive. I saw the photos. I talked to Aunt. I know you were taking her out while Mom was in the hospital. And then you decided to invite her on the trip that I planned to help you heal from the loss of the woman you were cheating on. You really thought I was going to pay for that? There was another pause, then a week. You do not understand what it was like. You are right, I said. I do not understand what it is like to secretly date someone while your wife is hooked up to machines and your kids are taking shifts in the hospital. I do not understand that at all. He went quiet. In the background, I could hear his girlfriend's voice asking what was happening. Then he said quietly, I have a right to be happy. She is gone. I cannot live in a grave forever. I felt something inside me snap at that. She is gone, he said, like my mom was a misplaced box instead of a person whose hands I held while she struggled to breathe. You are right, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. She is gone, and you can do whatever you want with whoever you want now. You can build whatever new life you want. But you are not going to do it on my dime and pretend there was no betrayal. You lost the right to ask me for anything the moment you made that choice. He started yelling again about respect and how I was his daughter and how money comes and goes, but family is forever. I let him talk until it turned into the same circle of phrases he always uses when someone calls him out. Then I said, enjoy your trip, and hung up. Not even 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number from the same area. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. It was her. She started out crying, saying how she had been so excited, how she had begged for time off for this vacation, how she had bought new clothes and everything. Then the crying turned into accusing. She said I was cruel for doing this to a man who had suffered so much. She said I was jealous because my dad had found happiness again, and I did not want to share him. She said I was punishing her for something she could not control because, when feelings happen, they happen. She also said, very clearly, that she had never had a chance to take that kind of luxury trip in her life, and that she had already imagined all the photos by the pool, holding drinks and wearing matching outfits. She talked more about the pictures than about my dad. She said she had already thought of captions about living the life she deserved. I sat on the bed listening, my brother leaning in next to me, both of us making faces. When she finally ran out of steam, she said something about how she hoped I could live with myself ruining their special week. Then she hung up without waiting for an answer. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to my brother, and then blocked her number. I did not bother calling her back. She had already given me everything I needed. She had basically put into words what we had suspected, that she cared more about what being with my dad looked like than about who he actually was. Over the next few days, my brother and I did what we had planned to do in the first place. We slept in, we sat by the pool at our not very impressive but perfectly fine hotel. We ate too much at the free breakfast and took long walks on the beach. We talked about our mom a lot. It was not exactly relaxing, but it was honest. Updates about my dad and his girlfriend came in through the family grapevine. My grandparents called to check on us and ended up telling us that my dad had found a last-minute place to stay near the resort. But it was nothing like what he had expected. The room was small, the air conditioning barely worked, and there were complaints about mold in the reviews that, according to my grandmother, turned out to be very accurate. A cousin who had stayed close to both sides without picking one told us that my dad and his girlfriend were fighting constantly. She had gone in expecting this fantasy week that matched what he had apparently promised her, and instead she got a cheap hotel and awkward dinners. She complained loudly to anyone who would listen that she had been misled about his situation. 2 days into the trip, she ended up booking an earlier flight home. She made him pay the change fee and told people he was not the person she thought he was. My dad stayed behind alone for the rest of the week, in that sad little room with the broken air conditioner, probably thinking about the pictures he would not be posting. I wish I could say that hearing all that made me feel guilty. It did not. What I felt was this dark, quiet satisfaction, not joy. Exactly. More like a sense that for once reality had lined up with what someone actually deserved. When we got back home, things did not magically settle. If anything, they got messier. My dad tried to call a few times, but I let his calls go to voicemail. He left long messages where he alternated between apologizing, defending himself, and blaming me for destroying his relationship. He said it had been complicated with my mom near the end, that she had been gone in her mind before she died, and that he had just been lonely. He compared himself to people who move on quickly after losing a spouse like that, somehow made everything okay. He never once admitted that what he did while my mom was still conscious and aware counted as betrayal. Then, one afternoon, I got a long message on a social media app from his ex-girlfriend. She had apparently forgotten I blocked her number, but not that she could still type. It was one of those long, rambling texts that start with, "I know you hate me, but please read this." She wrote about how they had met at work, how they had been just friends at first, how they had fallen for each other by accident during a very hard time in his life. She said my mom had been so sick that it was like she was already gone, that she often did not recognize what was happening around her, and that because of that, the relationship did not feel like cheating. She used the phrase emotional widow, like she had read it somewhere and thought it sounded deep. She said she believed my mom would have wanted my dad to be happy and not alone. She actually wrote that. Then she turned it around and said that if I were more mature, I would see that what they had was real, and that my reaction was childish and selfish. I read the whole thing twice just to make sure I was not misinterpreting it. Then I took screenshots of every single paragraph and sent them to my brother. He replied with a single line. She basically wrote us a confession. Wow. We saved the screenshots in a shared folder, not because we were planning to take her to court or anything dramatic like that, but because we were tired of being told we were imagining things, tired of being asked to see our dad as a victim of his own feelings. Meanwhile, my dad's life was starting to unravel in a way that had nothing to do with us directly, and everything to do with the way he had been living for years. The double life, the spending, the pretending he had more money than he did. The trip fiasco had cost him more than he expected. The cheap hotel, the last-minute flights, the bills he had already been delaying. One day, my brother forwarded me a message my dad had sent him, asking for a small loan to get through the month. He told me not to tell you, my brother wrote. So of course I am telling you. My dad said he would pay him back, that it was just a rough patch, and he kept texting smaller and smaller requests until my brother finally blocked him. We did not. Instead, we made a different choice. My brother still had more people from our dad's side of the family on his social media than I did. I had already unfollowed most of them after my mom died, because I could not handle the posts about how strong my dad was without wanting to throw my phone. So one evening, we went over to my brother's place with my laptop, opened a new post on his profile, and laid everything out. We did not write it like a rage rant, even though part of me wanted to. We just told the story. We started with my mom's illness, how she had gone through all those treatments believing she had a husband who was by her side. We mentioned how he had started spending more time at work, how he always insisted it was because of responsibilities. Then we included the timeline. The photos from the restaurants, the one from 8 months before she died, the one where his hand was on the other woman's back. We attached the screenshots of the girlfriend's message where she admitted they had fallen in love while my mom was still alive and tried to justify it by saying my mom was already half gone. We did not tag everyone. We only tagged a few people. My dad, his ex, one of his sisters who had been very loud about how ungrateful we were. We locked the post so only family and close friends could see it. We did not want this to be public humiliation for the sake of it. We just wanted the people who had been told one version of events to see another one. The reactions came in slowly at first, then faster. Some people liked the post without commenting, which in our family is basically the same thing as whispering in a corner. Others left shocked replies saying they did not know, that they were sorry, that they had assumed my dad's story was the whole truth. A few people tried to defend him in the comments, talking about how grief makes you do crazy things, but it was hard for them to keep that angle going with screenshots right there showing he had been building this new relationship while his wife was still alive and aware. My dad did not comment. He called my brother and left a voicemail demanding the post be taken down. He said we were airing private family business, that we were trying to ruin his life. My brother did not delete anything. My grandparents called me the next day. My grandmother cried, saying she wished she had spoken up, that she had suspected but did not want to believe it. My grandfather was quieter, but I could hear the anger in his voice when he said, he should have been better than that. They did not ask us to take the post down or defend him. They finally stopped making excuses, and that meant more than any apology from my dad. I heard she lost a few clients. I cannot prove it was because of us, but the timing was not subtle. From what I heard through the family grapevine, that relationship did not even survive a month after the trip. Once the resort fantasy and his promises were gone, and it was just real life and his real bank account, she lost interest fast and moved on to someone else. Honestly, I was not surprised. About 4 months after the post went live, my dad sold the house we grew up in. He had taken out a second mortgage years earlier to cover debts and then more debts, and the numbers had finally caught up to him. The sale cleared what he owed but did not leave much extra. He downsized to a small place in another part of town. My grandparents told us about it in an awkward voice, like they were not sure which parts they were allowed to mention. People sometimes ask me now if I regret what we did, if I think we went too far with the hotel plan, with the post, with cutting him off. I do not have a neat answer for that. I know we were not perfect. I know canceling the reservation was petty and mean in a way that does not fit with the version of myself I like to imagine in my head. I know there were probably more mature ways to confront what happened, but I also know my mom died thinking she had a husband who loved her more than anything. I know she apologized to him for leaving him alone. I know she worried about how he would cope after she was gone. I know he took that worry and used it as cover to slide straight into a relationship he had already been building. I know he let us pity him while he lied. So no, I do not really lose sleep over his ruined vacation or his awkward new living situation. If anything keeps me up, it is the memories of my mom's hands in mine, of the way she looked at me in those last weeks when she could still focus, like I was the only stable thing in the room. That is the part I think about when I wonder if we did the right thing. Not the resort, not the social media. Her. These days I keep my distance. My brother does too. We talk to our grandparents, to our aunt, to the cousin who always knows everything. We take care of each other when the grief hits out of nowhere. When a song comes on the radio that sounds like the ones Mom used to hum in the kitchen, when someone unknowingly mentions how romantic it is when people find love again after tragedy. If my dad ever wants to actually talk about what he did, really talk, not just talk around it with excuses and half apologies, maybe I will listen. Maybe there is a universe where he owns it, and we can build something different. Right now, in this universe, we are strangers who share some DNA and a list of memories that do not match. Sometimes when people ask about my parents, I say my mom is gone and my dad lives in another part of town, and I leave it at that. It is easier than explaining the trip, the extra room, the moldy hotel, the screenshots. It is easier than explaining how grief can make you ignore the obvious, until the day it sends you an email about a third suite you did not book and everything finally snaps into focus. I know that sounds dramatic, but that really is how it happened. One small notification in the middle of a workday. One extra room. One stranger's voice calling herself my dad's partner on the phone. One choice to stop protecting someone who should have protected us. It did not fix anything. It did not bring my mom back. It did not undo the years of lies. It just made sure that from that point on, my dad paid for his own rooms, in every sense of the word. What I did not expect was how much the fallout would keep rippling, even after the trip disaster and the post. I thought there would be a big explosion, and then silence. That is how it works in movies, right? In real life, it was more like a series of smaller aftershocks that kept shaking things I thought were already settled. A few weeks after we posted everything, my grandparents asked me and my brother to come over for dinner. They live in one of those older neighborhoods with narrow streets and big trees. The kind of place where everyone knows who belongs to which car. I knew my dad might be there, but I went anyway because my grandparents have never done anything to deserve being cut off. My brother picked me up, and we spent the whole drive there making up stupid backup plans in case things got weird. They always get weird, by the way. There has never been a family dinner in that house that did not go slightly off the rails. When we walked in, my grandmother hugged us so tight I could barely breathe. My grandfather patted my shoulder, which is basically his version of sobbing. I looked over their shoulders and saw my dad sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a glass of water like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but like someone had turned down the volume on his presence. "Thank you for coming," my grandmother said, her eyes flicking between us and him. I sat down across from my dad because I refused to be the one avoiding eye contact. If this was going to happen, it was going to happen in full view. My brother sat next to me, close enough that our elbows touched. My dad cleared his throat. "I did not appreciate being ambushed online," he said. "No hello, no how are you, just straight to that." "Hi," I answered, because I am petty like that. "I am. Nice to see you too." My grandmother shifted in her seat. "Maybe we can all take a breath before jumping in," she suggested. My brother leaned back, arms crossed. "We did not ambush you," he said. "We told the truth. You have been telling your version for years. We posted ours once." My dad looked like he wanted to argue with the word truth, but could not quite find a way around the screenshots. He finally said, "There were things in that message she wrote that were out of line. She should not have sent that to you. So you agree that saying mom was basically gone so it did not count as cheating was disgusting?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. He winced. "She worded it badly." "No," I said. "She worded it honestly. That is how you both thought about it. You were already done with the marriage in your head, so it did not feel like betrayal. That is the problem." My grandfather spoke up then, his voice rough. "Your mother was sitting right there at our table last Thanksgiving, laughing and asking for more pie. And you expect me to believe she was not really there anymore?" he asked my dad. My dad rubbed his forehead. "I am not saying she was not there," he muttered. "I am saying things were complicated. Everybody has complicated," my grandmother said. "Not everybody brings a new woman around for dinner when their wife is still going through chemo." That was new information. My brother and I both turned toward her. "He did what?" I asked. She realized what she had said and pressed her lips together like she wanted to shove the words back in. My dad closed his eyes like he knew it was over. "She came by a few times," my grandmother admitted quietly. "Your father said she was just a friend from work who was helping him with some paperwork. Your mother was too sick to be here. I did not want to believe it was more than that. I am sorry." No one talked for a minute. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I stared at my plate, tracing the little pattern around the edge with my thumbnail. "This is what I mean," I finally said. "It is always complicated, or you do not understand, or it just happened. We are not stupid. We were there. We saw you leave the hospital to go back to work. We just did not know you were making reservations at restaurants on the way." My dad's shoulders slumped. For the first time since everything blew up, he looked something like regretful instead of just offended. "I handled it badly," he said. "I know that." "It is more than bad handling," my brother said. "You lied. For a long time. You let us build this whole story in our heads about how heartbroken you were. You let people praise you for being such a devoted husband while you were already moving on." "I was heartbroken," my dad insisted. "Your mother was everything to me." I do not know why that line was the one that made me snap, but it was. Maybe because I had heard him say it 100 times at the funeral and in the months after, like a script. I leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "If she was everything to you," I said slowly, "you would not have needed someone else while she was still alive. You do not get to declare someone your everything and then go on dates while they are getting lab results." My grandmother did not say anything, but her eyes were shiny. My grandfather stared at his hands. My dad did not apologize that night. Not really. He said things like, "I am sorry it hurt you, and I wish I had done some things differently," which is not the same as, "I am sorry I cheated on your mother while she was dying." It is the apology version of canceling a reservation and pretending it was the hotel's idea. We left at the end of the night with full plates and empty hands. On the drive home, my brother asked me if I felt better. I told him I felt tired. Not physically, but down to my bones. I think I wanted him to say something he is just not capable of saying, I admitted. Like I was still waiting for this moment where he goes, "You are right, I was awful." I should have protected you instead of using you. That is not happening. So what do we do? He asked. We stop waiting, I said. We build our lives without assuming he is going to be part of the healthy version of them. It sounded very mature when I said it. It did not feel that way. It felt like another little death. A few months later, the first big holiday without my dad rolled around. My grandmother wanted to host like always, and my grandfather wanted all his kids there, which meant my dad was invited. She called me in advance, her voice careful. You are both welcome, she said. I will not ask you to sit next to each other. I just do not want to pretend you do not exist to each other. I told her we would think about it. Then I spent an entire afternoon at the grocery store staring at canned cranberry sauce like it held the answer. It did not. It was just canned cranberry sauce. I still bought some because my mom used to slice it into perfect circles and pretend it was fancy. In the end, my brother and I went for dessert instead of dinner. We showed up late on purpose, hoping the main drama would have already passed. My dad was sitting on the far end of the couch when we walked in, talking to one of my cousins about sports. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw us. For a second, everyone froze like someone had pressed pause on a movie. I said hello. That was it. No hug, no small talk. He nodded. We spent the rest of the evening orbiting each other like two planets that used to share the same sun and now just happen to pass in the same sky sometimes. My aunt pulled me into the kitchen at one point, handing me a dish towel to dry plates. You know, she said, your father is lucky. I laughed. Is he, though? He is lucky you two still show up at all, she said. If it were me, I do not think I could. I shrugged. We are not here for him, I said. We are here for Grandma and Grandpa. They did not cheat on anybody. She nodded. I just do not want you to feel like you owe him anything. Showing up is already more than he deserves. Later that night, after we got home, I lay in bed and scrolled through old photos of my mom on my phone. There she was in the kitchen, wearing an apron and laughing, flour on her nose. There she was at the beach, hair pulled back, holding our hands in the waves. There she was in a hospital bed trying to smile around the oxygen tube. It hit me that none of those pictures changed depending on what my dad had done. Her love for us was steady. Her laugh was real. Her hand squeezing mine in the hospital was not less sincere because he had been texting someone else in the hallway. If anything, it made her even more precious to me, because she managed to give us everything she had while someone she trusted was already half gone. Seeing that clearly did something to the anger. It did not erase it, but it shifted it. I stopped feeling like I needed my dad to admit anything before I could move on. I still wanted him to, obviously, but I could not keep my whole emotional life on pause waiting for a confession that might never come. About 6 months into all of this, when I realized the anger was not fading but just changing shape, I started seeing a therapist. Yes, I know, classic move. Daughter of a messy family ends up in therapy. Shocking. I went because my sleep was a mess and because I kept replaying the same conversations in my head. I told her about the trip, about the extra room, about the voicemail, about the post. I told her about my mom's illness in a way I had not really allowed myself to out loud before. She asked a lot of annoying questions at first, like why I thought I had to protect my dad's feelings at the expense of my own, or why I still flinched when I imagined him being uncomfortable. She pointed out patterns I did not want to see, like how I had been playing mediator for my parents since middle school, soothing my mom when my dad was late and making excuses for him so she would not be disappointed. That is part of why canceling that reservation felt so big, she said once. It was the first time you chose your own anger over his comfort. It felt terrible, I admitted. And also good, she added. I hated that she was right. It had felt terrible and good at the same time, like scratching a wound that needed air even though it stung. We talked about boundaries a lot. Not in the trendy buzzword way people throw around online, but in the very boring, practical way. Like, what do I do when my dad texts me long messages at midnight about how lonely he is? Do I answer? Do I tell him why I am not answering? Do I block him? Do I send a thumbs up and call it a day? There was no perfect answer. We tried different things. Sometimes I ignored him. Sometimes I wrote back one sentence that did not invite more conversation. Sometimes I failed and got pulled into a whole thread that left me drained for days. The point, she said, was not to do it perfectly, but to notice what I was choosing. The thing about therapy is that it does not magically fix anyone else's behavior. My dad did not wake up one day transformed because I processed my feelings in a small room with soft chairs. He kept doing his thing. He started seeing someone new eventually. I found out because my grandmother accidentally mentioned the woman he has been seeing these days, and then tried to pretend she had not said it. She is welcome to him, I said, and meant it in a way I could not have imagined meaning it a year earlier. That did not mean everything was smooth. There was drama about my mom's things when he sold the house. He texted me one afternoon saying he was clearing out the closets and asked if I wanted anything. I assumed he meant generic stuff like old dishes or photo frames, so I said not really, I was busy. Then my brother called the next day, furious. "Did you know he gave some of Mom's jewelry to his new girlfriend?" he asked. I did not breathe for a second. "He did what?" "He told Grandma he did not think you would want any of it," my brother said. "So he gave some pieces away." When Grandma ran into him and his new girlfriend at a restaurant last month, the woman was wearing Mom's bracelet. I did not even respond to that text from my brother. I drove straight to my grandparents' house with half my hair still wet and my shoes on the wrong feet. My grandmother met me at the door with that guilty look she gets when she has news she knows I will hate. "He should not have done that," she said, before I even opened my mouth. I told him that. "Where is he?" I asked. "He left an hour ago," she said. "He did not want to see you. I think he knows you are the only one who will say exactly what you think." That was the problem, I guess. He was not wrong. I sat at their table and cried in a way I had not since the funeral. Ugly, hiccuping sobs, the kind where you keep apologizing for getting tears on everything. My grandmother cried too. My grandfather handed me a tissue and said, "We still have some things put away. Your mother left a box here before she went to the hospital. She did not trust your father not to lose it." It turned out my mom had been more aware than any of us wanted to admit. In the back of their closet was a small box with some jewelry, a few handwritten recipes, and a letter with my name on it. The letter was not a dramatic confession of secrets. It was just my mom being my mom, reminding me to eat, to take breaks, to wear sunscreen, to forgive myself when I messed up. She wrote one line that I have read so many times I could probably recite it from memory. "If your father ever makes you feel like his choices are your fault, remember that they are not." It felt like she had reached out from those last months and smacked me gently on the back of the head. I did not chase my dad down about the jewelry. I wanted to, badly. I imagined standing in front of him and demanding every bracelet, every ring. I imagined telling the new woman exactly whose earrings she was wearing. But in the end, I let it go. Not because he deserved mercy, but because I needed peace more than I needed those particular objects on my dresser. My brother was less philosophical about it. He still cannot say my dad's name without his jaw tightening. When he sees him at family things, he is civil for the sake of the grandparents and then leaves early. I do not blame him. The last time my dad tried to do some grand gesture was about a year after the trip. He showed up at my apartment unannounced on a rainy Saturday morning, holding a cardboard box and looking like someone who had rehearsed a speech in the car and forgotten half of it on the way up the stairs. "I thought we could go through some of these together," he said when I opened the door. Old photos. I found them when I was unpacking. I did not want to throw them out. I stepped aside and let him in, because I am apparently incapable of turning away a person holding a box of memories. We sat on my couch and flipped through picture after picture. My parents at their wedding. My mom holding me in the hospital. Tired and happy. My brother as a toddler covered in spaghetti sauce. My dad with his arm around my mom at some company picnic, both of them squinting against the sun. "I miss her too," he said quietly at one point, running his thumb along the edge of a photo. "I know," I said, and I did. That was the worst part. I knew he missed her. I knew he had loved her in his way. People think love and betrayal cannot exist in the same relationship, but I have watched them sit together at the same kitchen table. He started to say something else then, something about wanting to start over, but I cut him off. "I do not think you really understand what starting over would mean," I said. "It would mean you actually saying out loud what you did. Not just I handled it badly or things were complicated. It would mean you saying you chose yourself over her and over us, over and over again." He bristled like I had slapped him. "It is not that simple," he said. "It is exactly that simple," I answered. "You made choices. You do not have to list them all, but you also do not get to pretend they were accidents." We sat there in silence for a while after that, the box of photos between us. Eventually, he stood up and said he should go. He left the pictures on the coffee table. At the door, he paused. "I hope one day you will see that I am not the villain in this story," he said. "I do not think you are a villain," I told him. "I think you are a man who did some really selfish things and still wants to be treated like the hero. Those are not the same." He did not have an answer for that. He just nodded, almost like a bow, and walked down the hallway. Sometimes I wonder what version of this story he tells people now. Maybe in his version, he is the widower who tried his best and his ungrateful kids turned on him because they could not accept that he moved on. Maybe I am the controlling daughter who canceled his vacation out of spite. Maybe he leaves out the restaurant photos and the work parties and the way he added a third suite to a trip I was paying for. What I know is my version. My version has messy feelings and impulsive decisions and a canceled reservation that still makes me feel both guilty and weirdly proud. My version has my mom's letter and my grandmother's slip of the tongue and my brother's furious texts. My version has me, sitting by a pool at a modest hotel, deciding for the first time that my comfort mattered as much as his. If you asked me now whether I would do it all again, I do not have a clean yes or no. I think I would still cancel the resort. I think I would still block the ex-girlfriend after saving her messages. I think I would still post the screenshots. Maybe I would write a calmer caption. Maybe I would wait a day. Maybe I would not. What I definitely would not change is the part where I stopped bending myself into knots to keep my dad from feeling bad about choices he made on purpose. That part I would keep. And as for the trip, the money, the rooms, all of that feels like the surface. Underneath, it was never really about the resort. It was about who paid the price for his comfort. For a long time, that was my mom. Then it was me. Canceling that reservation did not balance the scales, but it did shift them a little. Now, when I sit at my tiny kitchen table with my own stack of bills, I think about the way my mom used to say that love shows up in the boring things, in the rides to appointments, in the late-night pharmacy runs, in the way you hold someone's fear without making it about you. I think about how my dad failed at that in the end, and how I am determined not to. I do not know what kind of father he will be to whoever decides to stay in his life. I do not know if he will ever say the words we all know are sitting there, heavy and obvious. I do not know if he ever looks at a resort ad now and flinches the way I do when I hear his ringtone. What I do know is that the next time someone tries to book a room in my life without asking, I will notice. I will not ignore the obvious. And I will definitely check who is using the link before I hand over my card. One thing my therapist asked me recently was what I would say to my younger self, the one sitting in the hospital cafeteria eating vending machine chips while my dad rushed off to answer emails. I told her I would sit next to that girl, steal a chip out of the bag, and tell her gently that none of this is her job to fix, that her mother loves her, that her father's choices are not proof that she was not enough, and that one day she will stop paying for rooms she never agreed to stay in. It sounds cheesy when I say it out loud, but it helps on the nights when the grief gets loud and the anger tries to crawl back in through the cracks.